Sup y'all? What you see here is an excavation of a place called Dra in modern-day Jordan. It is considered to be one of the earliest examples of human settlement. However, there is a great deal of uncertainty as to where and when the first permanent settlements came about. Nonetheless, what we do know is that thousands of years ago, our planet underwent a period of change. And as a result of this change, people began to adapt from constantly traveling to hunt and gather their food to a more sedentary lifestyle, staying predominantly in one place while producing their own food. People around the world, most of whom had no contact with each other, began laying down the foundations of civilization, bringing about the human age and the expansion of mankind across the globe. A typical question one asks is, what does any of this have to do with me? Well, the short answer is, everything. Here's another question for you. Why are we here? Why are we in a place called the United States, the most dominant country in the world, speaking English and not Chinese, for example? Why did we look the way we do, and how did this happen the way it did? It's no surprise that to answer these questions, we must look to history and geography. And since there's no better place to start than the beginning, we ask yet another question. What is the great catalyst of change? In this first map, you see the world as it is today. The different colors here actually signify different regions. That's all they're showing. So if you take a look, you can see North America, South America. You can see Western Europe and Northern Europe, along with Eastern Europe. You've got North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa. You have the Middle East and Central Asia, along with Russia. You're also looking at South Asia, anchored by India, and East Asia, anchored by China and Japan, Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand. Okay, so in the foundations of civilization, we're going to start off looking at the great catalyst of change. During times of major environmental stress, fewer resources are available for all living organisms to consume. So a bottleneck may ensue, which is an acute reduction in the size of a population. Certain organisms inherit traits that prove to be better suited for the changing environment, so they in turn live on while others die off. This is natural selection. The need to adapt under changing conditions is a pattern that repeats itself in nature, and as we will investigate, these patterns exist in human nature as well. For example, around 542 million years ago, the Cambrian explosion occurred in which most complex life emerged, most likely due to some catastrophic environmental event. Much later, sometime around 250 million years ago, the supercontinent Pangaea began to break apart into the continents we know today. In 1912, Alfred Wegener formed his theory of continental drift, noting that many fossils of the same extinct organisms were found on lands that were far apart. Wegener suggested that when the organisms were alive, the lands were joined together and later drifted away from each other. Today, this is proven science through plate tectonics, and our continents are still moving, albeit very slowly, at the pace of around an inch a year. An example of the movement of tectonic plates is the Ring of Fire around the basin of the Pacific Ocean. It contains around 75% of the world's active and dormant volcanoes and over 80% of all earthquakes along this vast belt. Here you see the history of the Earth organized chronologically along the geologic time scale. The most recent era is extremely compressed, so that's what this second timeline shows. For millions of years, long periods of glaciations saw the expanse of ice sheets spreading from Antarctica and Greenland, offset by shorter periods of interglaciations, in which the ice sheets receded. When we zoom in even further to the third timeline, we see the Pleistocene epoch, starting around 2 million years ago at the onset of the most recent ice age. This lasted until around 12,000 years ago, you see right here, when the current Holocene epoch started with the Neolithic era, the last stretch of the Stone Age before metal tools were used. So here you see the end of the last ice age as the temperatures rise over a period of thousands of years. A leading theory suggests these glaciations are related to time periods of lower solar activity resulting in a greater likelihood of supervolcanoes. One of the most devastating eruptions occurred around 70,000 years ago with Mount Toba, around Sumatra and modern-day Indonesia. The human race dwindled to as few as 10,000 people at that time. Men and women were hunters and gatherers, in groups of around 50 people, almost constantly on the move following the seasons as well as available game. This style of living was a natural and logical division of labor in which the males primarily carried out the hunting, while the females primarily carried out the gathering. Of course, the vast majority of people are not hunters and gatherers today, so we come full circle to ask, what is the great catalyst of change? As Plato has often been paraphrased, necessity is the mother of all invention. So, when conditions change, reducing available resources, such as food, it becomes exceedingly difficult to maintain the carrying capacity or capability of a place to sustain the population. Sometime around 11,000 BCE, global temperatures dipped dramatically in what was known as the Big Freeze.
Tonight's forecast, a freeze is coming.
And this was followed by a global shift to warmer and drier conditions.
It's so hot. Milk was a bad choice.
Now, large mammals, such as woolly mammoths and giant sloths, failed to adapt, and they died out. Likewise, wild grains and berries also failed to grow as plentifully as they once had. Hunting and gathering became woefully inefficient. People starved and died. They needed an alternative. If colder global temperatures have proven to be the great catalyst of change, what are the keys to success under such drastic changing conditions? While there are a litany of plausible and arguable answers, we will look at two specific explanations: culture and geography. The keys to success can be compared to a poker game. First, we'll consider geography, or more specifically, the physical environments in which people live. Certain places, at certain times, have more resources, or are better suited for human survival and success. So, in this analogy, geography is like the hand you're dealt in a game of cards. The second key is culture, or the customs and beliefs of a group of people. Those whose values and tendencies are best suited for the changing conditions are more likely to succeed. Considering the analogy again, it's not just the cards you're dealt, it's how you play your hand that determines success. Now, even before ancient man had developed technology such as agriculture, they had improved other things, such as improved tools like baskets or weapons, such as you can see the stone arrowheads you see right here. Also other innovations like the controlled use of fire. But one of the most impressive advancements they made were granaries. There's evidence that sophisticated ways of storing food through granaries in the Middle East date to over 11,000 years ago. Now this is significant because it predates seed domestication of crops such as wheat or oats, by a full millennium. Some have even suggested that the development of granaries actually may have led to plant domestication, which is the deliberate planting of wild seeds. And this was done in order to make the gathering process easier. So what invention started it all? The plow, likely first originating in the Fertile Crescent. The plow enabled people to organize the planting of crops and allowed them to better predict the amount of food they would produce more accurately. So, with technologies such as granaries and the plow, mankind transcended into an entirely new age.